Hello! Welcome to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me as always is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm okay, Clay, but sometimes my arms bend back.
Yes. Well, I've got good news and bad news for you listeners out there. The bad news is we have come up to our wild card. And that's good news. But the bad news.
Bad news, everyone.
The bad news is
we're off the rails.
we will not be covering X,
yes,
as we said last time. The good news is that gum you like is going to be coming back in style. I was informed by listener Kyle that this is the 30th anniversary of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me this year.
Yeah, wow.
And he asked if we were ever going to talk about it, and I figured wild card anyway. Probably I can't think of another reason why we would talk about Twin Peaks, because this movie's not on the list.
Right.
So, and I have a feeling we both have a lot of thoughts on Twin Peaks.
Yes.
So X will have to be put on the back burner until somewhat time down the road. And today we are talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me from 1992. It is not on our list, but it has a 64% Rotten Tomatoes score.
Huh.
Had you seen this before?
Do you have to ask me that question?
I do not.
Yes.
Here's a question
Yes,
for
I
you.
have seen this one before.
What were the circumstances under which you first watched this movie?
I was 19 or 20 years old, and I took a college class on David Lynch.
Interesting. Okay. Had you seen the show at that point?
I had seen choice episodes
Okay.
as part of said college class because we did all of Lynch's filmography in order.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting class.
It was fucking fascinating. It
Yeah.
was it was like David Lynch and the unconscious mind or something like that.
Sure,
so we
sure.
went into a lot of like Freud and dream logic stuff alongside like watching the films, and
That's fun.
Yeah, it was really good.
I actually would really like to take that class.
Yeah, it was fucking baller class. It was probably my favorite class I ever took in college.
That's great. My first viewing of this movie, excuse me. Interestingly enough, this was the first Twin Peaks thing I ever watched.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. I had not seen the show. I believe, if I'm doing my math right, I probably watched this after I saw Mulholland Drive,
Okay.
because I believe Mulholland Drive was the first David Lynch movie I'd seen.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And
Yeah.
so then I think I saw this, and I was aware of this, and it's like, oh, I'm aware of the show. People really like the show. I'll check out the movie.
Were you totally lost when you first watched this?
No, oddly enough, I really liked it.
Oh, cool.
And this movie gets a bad rap for reasons
Yeah.
I can kind of understand, but also kind of not understand.
Yeah.
I think it actually might work better if you've never seen the show.
Yeah, or like I had said, I had seen sort of like specific episodes.
Yeah.
So like, I was in this class and we're trying to cover all of David Lynch, and so we started off with like short art school films and like Eraserhead and shit.
Yeah.
And so, you're kind of, it's a lot to cover in one semester.
Yes, very much
So
so.
we could not watch all of Twin Peaks. So my professor had kind of curated, like, here are the, like, 4 episodes.
Oh, cool.
You've got to watch. So I knew at least, like, I knew who Laura was. I knew what was going to happen to her. I knew of Bob. So, like, I had seen sort of, like, the key, like, if you think of, like, season 1 Twin Peaks, the like 3 or 4 episodes that you would pull out as being the real pivotal like Black Lodge stuff.
Right.
Like I had seen just those, and I had not seen any of the like get to know our lovable yet quirky characters around town. Like
Yes.
I hadn't seen any of that. So Fire Walk with Me actually really worked for me too the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I think had this been the first David Lynch movie I'd ever seen, I don't know if it would have worked.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
Having seen Mulholland Drive,
God, I love that movie.
my pump was already primed for weirdness.
Yeah.
And so going into this, I didn't come out and go, yes, it all makes perfect sense. But
and if anyone out there has, please get in touch with us because I have questions.
Yeah. I sent you that 4-hour video, right?
Yes, you did.
I've watched that video multiple times now. I just enjoy putting it on in the background when I'm working.
I started it and then I stopped when it was getting too deep into the return, which I shamefully still have not finished.
Yeah, well, we're probably gonna. I might spoil a bunch of that for you in this show. I haven't decided.
You totally can because at this point it's been long enough that it's 100% on me.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like if I get spoiled now, it's my fault.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that video is came under fire from a lot of people because of its
really
because the presentation of it was very absolute. And one of the things, obviously, with David Lynch's work is I don't know if there's an absolute understanding.
Yeah.
But
I think he would definitely prefer there not to be.
Right. And I think that video was positing some interesting underlying things that I think people jumped on it a bit too much as being like they thought the guy was like, this is the only way you can interpret this show.
Got it. Yeah.
But what I got from it was some really interesting analysis and like a lot of fairly substantial evidence to back up the reading that this guy had.
Yeah.
I think he stretches it in some
stuff.
places. Yeah.
But
it was I thought it was a very, very interesting video.
Yeah.
And actually made me appreciate the show more. Like I watched it and I go, this makes me think about it in a different way and think about how he structured the show and stuff. That was the stuff I found the most interesting.
Yeah, because I think that video did a lot of good work in the vein of giving people who watched it some underlying like themes to keep an eye out on, which like even if you interpret them differently, it's helpful sometimes to have somebody go through these hours and hours of, because at this point you have the 2 seasons of the original Twin Peaks series, you've got the 1 season of The Return, and you've got Fire Walk with Me, and like the TV shows are long. That's a lot of hours of material. It's easy to miss stuff.
That's not even to mention the multiple books.
Yes.
That may or may not be canon depending on what day it is.
My friend gave me the Twin Peaks cookbook.
Oh, is it just donut recipes?
It's like pie recipes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think probably donuts. It's super cute. I will have to dig it up and like and show it to you because it's very 90s looking. Yeah. It's wonderful. I love it.
Excellent.
It's a great gift.
But yeah, so this was my first introduction to Twin Peaks, and
you just dove right into the deep end.
Yeah, I thought that it actually worked really well. For well, I don't know how much I want to get into this right now. Let's do the rest of the preamble, then we can get
sure.
Into
yeah, we forgot to do all of the stuff we usually do at the top of these.
We're gonna play the trailer for you. And we will be right back. You know what we should have done? We should have done this entire episode in backwards speak.
I'm not talented enough to do that.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, we'll play the trailer. Be right back.
My secret diary. That page is missing. There is no other person who could have known where it was.
Did Bobby give you this? Or is there someone new?
Your Laura disappeared. It's just me now. You made me write it all down.
Don't do that. She doesn't like that. How do you know what she likes? Who am I?
I don't know.
You look just like my Laura. It's yours! Don't make me do this!
Okay, Twin Peaks. So before we get into the movie,
Okay.
I wanted to play this beer commercial for you from the mid-90s.
Oh, boy.
Which is a glorious mashup of very much David Lynch Fire Walk With Me inspired camera work and grunge music.
Ooh.
Grunge culture.
Ooh.
It's become a bit of an in-joke with my friend Dan and I, so I just want you to bring you in and want you to watch this commercial. Because
Okay.
if you're anything like me, it's just the first time you're going to watch it of many.
Los Angeles, start your VCRs.
Say with more energy.
All of a sudden, I'm thirsty,
Give me a Bud Light.
so I go to the refrigerator.
I can't tell Bud
I just know how it's gonna taste.
Want some Bud Light, want some Bud Light, want some Bud Light, want some
And I take that awesome first long drink, and it hits me right there.
I am gobsmacked.
Yeah.
I have. What just happened? Were those supposed to be? Were we supposed to believe that they were real youths?
I don't know.
Like, there's just like a long-haired dude sitting in between two girls, and one of them is dressed sort of like. She's dressed like Bob, but she's got the hair and the face of Marilyn Monroe,
Yep.
and she keeps talking in a weird wannabe Audrey kind of voice.
Yep.
About how much she likes Bud Light, and he's just yelling in the background while like a overhead light swings around them.
Yeah, just doing some music, a cappella grunge vocalist singing.
Yeah, as most grunge vocalists were known to do.
Yes. Anyway,
Wow.
that's just a weird curiosity from the annals of history that I thought was
Beautiful.
pretty fun.
That's pretty great.
If you're listening to the show and you'd like to watch it, just look up Bud Light grunge, and it'll be the first thing that shows up.
Bud Light grunge does sound like a disgusting like
does,
sub
yes.
brand.
Okay, Twin Peaks. By the way, buckle up. This might be a long one.
Yeah, sorry guys. We are clearly a little
We
punch
have
drunk on this
we
one.
have all of Twin Peaks we need to cover, because that's in order to talk about this correctly, we need to talk about all of Twin Peaks at the same time. So
Yeah.
Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me from 1992, directed by David Lynch, written by David Lynch and Robert Engels, starring Sheryl Lee, Ray Wise, Chris Isaac, Kiefer Sutherland, Kyle MacLachlan, Miguel Ferrer, Moira Kelly, David Bowie, Frank Silva, and the grandma from Happy Gilmore. Amanda, what happens in Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me?
Alrighty, you guys ready for this?
Let's do it.
Laura Palmer's harrowing final days are chronicled 1 year after the murder of Teresa Banks, a resident of Twin Peaks' neighboring town.
Yeah, I mean, now I want to know. You said there was a really long one that was.
There was also of these summaries that I find on the internet because I'm too lazy to write my own. There was the really long one that I got mad at because it has a factual inaccuracy in the very first
Okay,
sentence.
let's hear it.
In the folksy town of Deerfield, Washington, FBI agent Desmond inexplicably disappears while hunting for the man who murdered a teen girl. The killer is never apprehended, and after experiencing dark visions and supernatural encounters, Agent Dale Cooper chillingly predicts that the culprit will claim another life. Meanwhile, in the similarly cozy town of Twin Peaks, hedonistic beauty Laura Palmer, also Laura is spelled wrong, hangs with lowlifes and seems destined for a grisly fate.
What I like about these two back-to-back is that one
Yeah.
sounds like one that was written where they were really trying to encapsulate the movie.
Yeah.
And then they just Control-A, deleted everything, and was like The Last Days of Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks. Done. Send.
Yeah. I like the first one I did I like more because it's correct.
Right.
The second one I do not like because it's Deer Meadow, Washington, not Deerfield, Washington. It's Agent Chet Desmond who disappears. What else? There's a couple other things. Similarly cozy town because they call it a folksy town of Deerfield. It's kind of a garbage town.
Yeah,
which is
we're gonna
something
get
I want
into
to
that.
talk about. Yeah. So it's kind of inaccurate to call it a folksy or cozy town. And then calling Laura, or as they say, Lara Palmer, a hedonistic beauty and just saying she hangs with lowlifes and is destined for a grisly fate, I think is very reductive and unfair to Laura.
I would agree.
All right.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
What are some things we might find in this movie?
Some things you will find in this movie, Clay, include
Mm-hmm.
David Bowie providing his own wardrobe.
He had to have.
I swear I've seen that suit in a 90s Bowie music
Yeah,
video.
I read in the trivia that they jammed his filming like 5 days into in between rehearsals for the Tin Machines tour. Oh. So I have to imagine
He just showed up.
He just showed up
Yeah.
with whatever he was wearing at
Yeah.
rehearsal. Yeah.
I also read in the trivia that hiring him started off as a joke.
Did it really?
Yeah. That when they were working on it, one of the like office assistants or whatever, every time they talked about a character, she would make the joke as played by David Bowie for
Nice.
all of them. And finally, David Lynch just went, you know who we should hire? We should hire David Bowie.
I would believe.
Just called him up and got him.
If David Lynch finally gave an interview, or like you had a cup of coffee, spiked coffee with him, and you were the only two around,
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if he was like, "Hey, everything I do starts as a joke." But
I think he's too sincere for that.
probably yes.
You'll also find a cup of Good Morning America.
Strongest coffee this side of the Mississippi.
Best cup of coffee you're going to have. The Great Went,
I don't understand what that is supposed to mean.
and she was the muffin.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's just clip out I don't understand what that's supposed to mean, and I'll just put it on like a soundboard, and
Yeah.
I'll hit it
Yeah.
anytime.
Run it on loop for the
Yeah.
next hour and change, and we have our episode. Turkey slander.
I've had enough of this slander of turkeys.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Yes. The best gobble gobble turkey line delivery this side of Geely. I don't know if you've ever seen Geely. But
I have
there's a-
not, but the fact that you have makes me very
I
happy.
saw Geely in the theater.
Oh my God.
I went on purpose with multiples of our friends. We went there specifically to say we saw Geely in the theater. Our plan was to see Geely and then go see something else afterwards. And when Geely was over, we just wanted to go home.
You all came out crying.
Well, it
Not
was-
because you were emotionally moved.
No, it was like it was just like a taxing experience. So we just everybody went home.
Everybody needed a nap.
Yes.
The world's most foreboding ceiling fan.
Yeah, they really dialed that thing up. Like when he turns
Yeah.
the fan on.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Once you realize why he's turning it on,
Right.
it's like, oh God, this
Yeah.
is disgusting. Ugh. Mini David Lynch.
That kid looks. I mean, I'm sure it's on purpose, but he looks
Yes.
exactly like David Lynch.
One of my favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gratuitous Jürgen Prochnow.
Yes. Weird cameo from Jürgen Prochnow as
How did
one
I
of
miss
the
this?
he's one of the woodsmen
Oh.
in the above the convenience store with the arm and
Yes.
Bob there.
Now I know how I missed this because there's a lot going on in that
Yeah,
convenience
it's
store.
like 10 frames of
It's
Jürgen
hard
Prochnow. Yeah.
to kind of fix on to get the whole scene fixed in your mind.
Yeah, he and David Lynch have a prior relationship clearly
Oh, yeah.
because he played Duke Leto in Dune.
Oh,
I don't know if he's been
yeah.
in anything else David Lynch has done, but
Maybe in the background somewhere.
yeah, he's got a very
Yeah.
recognizable face.
Yes.
So
Yes.
even under a giant fake beard, but
And the last thing you'll find in this movie is unquestionably horrible parenting.
yes.
Like, there's no question this time.
Yeah, it's almost like we should almost stop doing that gag after this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there was maybe one or two other movies that we use this gag, and then I end up saying like, I don't know how it gets worse than this. I found it.
Yep.
I found it. Here
Yep.
it is.
This is pretty much it, I think. So yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're not going to talk about Judy. We're not going to talk about Judy
Yeah.
at all.
Don't bring Judy into this.
Oh man, I love this movie. It's so fucking weird. Okay,
Clay's just gonna sit here in his leisure suit,
I
his
just
chin
don't
resting
even
on the
know.
edge of the desk, and Helga might know that he found something.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this. Okay, so yeah, so the first time I saw this,
Yes.
I had not seen Twin Peaks.
Yes.
And watching it again this time, I've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times since then, since having watched Twin Peaks, but I haven't really like watched it.
Yeah.
I have it on Blu-ray. I'll put it on from time to time if I'm doing stuff or whatever. You know, I just love the sound of women screaming in the background when I work. The first time I watched it, I keyed in to the story of Lara. I think the story, aside from the first 20 minutes of the movie with Chris Isaac,
Yes.
the story of Lara is very engaging and very well drawn.
Yeah.
And Sheryl Lee has like this masterclass performance.
Oh my God, yeah.
That I don't even know how a person like gets to the places that she has to go in this.
Yeah.
Or gets back from them, frankly.
I have no idea.
Yeah. And so when I saw it that first time, I really kind of keyed into this, like, wow, this is a really unbelievable story about this girl who she's on this dark path and everybody kind of abandons her. Like, I'm kind of stripping away the weird stuff at this point.
Right, yeah.
And you just end up with this story about a girl whose father's abusing her and she's just kind of spiraling out of control and ultimately dies.
Yeah.
Or is killed. Watching it this time, I feel like this movie should have been called Twin Peaks: The Explanation. Because while everything I just
Please,
said
Clay,
is still true.
explain it to us.
Well, no, because I feel like while everything I just said is still true, this is a really weird movie in that it explains everything, but it explains nothing at the same time. So, like, it goes out of its way to put all the pieces that you recognize from the show into place.
Yeah.
Like the diary and the key in the notebook and the missing pages and all this other, and like the showing where she was, where these other characters were.
Yeah.
So kind of telling that backstory. But it doesn't answer any of the larger like universe questions.
Right.
Which is not something that David Lynch is ever going to do.
Yeah.
And this movie did not get well received.
Yeah.
And I think part of that, or probably most of it, is because he explains a bunch of shit from this show where everybody just wants an explanation, but he didn't explain the stuff people wanted him to explain. And so it ends up just kind of falling flat.
Well, also, I think some of the things that people think they want explained, they really don't.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I have strong beliefs in that, and similarly, like, this is a little off topic, but you know how there's always like the cool kind of side character in the thing that is everybody's favorite character. The kind of big one is Han Solo.
Sure.
And everyone thinks they want to know everything about Han Solo, and then they come out with a Han Solo movie and no one likes it.
Yes.
And it's like, that movie could have been a great movie, but it's just not. It's not what you want to know.
What do
really.
you mean? I want to know how he got the word name Chewie from the name Chewbacca. Yeah. What are you talking about?
But do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
people
totally.
think
Yeah.
they want more of one thing sometimes, and it's not. They don't actually want it all spelled out for them the way that you might think you do at first.
Yeah. Well, this movie is a prequel to the TV show Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Which the TV show Twin Peaks famously starts with the discovery of Laura Palmer's body.
Yep.
And the main mystery throughout the show is who killed Laura Palmer. And that is kind of used as this springboard into the town of Twin Peaks, where you're introduced to all of these characters and ultimately this sort of like weird supernatural lore and stuff. But it all hangs on who killed Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
And when they got into season 2 of the show, I hope you don't feel like I'm talking at you, because I know you know all this stuff, but I'm just
I understand.
summarizing.
We've got to summarize it quick because we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah. When they got into season 2 of the show, the network basically forced them to reveal who killed Laura because everybody was just dying to know who killed Laura. And David Lynch very much did not want to do that.
Right.
Because he knew as soon as you reveal who killed Laura Palmer, the show dies.
Yep.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yep.
They revealed who killed Laura Palmer. It was her dad.
Yep.
And then everyone was like, oh. And then the show just loses all momentum because now...
Right, because why do you want to keep tuning in? I mean, it's like you might have over the first season of the show grown to love certain characters, but none of them had a plot aside from figuring out what happened to Laura that was compelling enough to keep you engaged just for that plot.
Yeah.
And no other plot tied all of these people and threads together. Like, she was the only through line for all of them.
Right.
And once you remove that, there's all these different like side, like B plots and C plots that just kind of are out there in the world, but they don't have anything to do with each other anymore.
Yeah, and he left the show at that point, and so
it seemed very acrimonious.
Yeah, it's like, remember that season of Community?
Yes,
where
the gas leak season.
where Dan Harmon left, and so everybody's trying to write Community like Harmon and his crew did, but it just doesn't feel right.
Right.
It becomes that.
Yeah.
And then he comes back for the end of the second season, and the last episode's really good, and they kind of ended on a cliffhanger and stuff, and that went unanswered for 25 years.
Yeah, I'll see you again in 25 years.
Yes, man, planned that out very well. But from that video I was telling you about,
yep,
one of the things that I took from it was one of the origins of the show, which is that it was a response to murder of the week type shows.
Yeah.
Where you're basically just consuming all of this pain and suffering.
Garmonbozia.
And you get your closure on whatever the murder was. It's all expendable. It's all disposable.
Right.
And then, you never care about any of the people involved or the people who are killed. And so he set up this story where it forces you to care about who Laura Palmer was, because that is the whole crux of the story. You can't just throw Laura Palmer out there. And so when they eventually did, that whole thing just went in the trash bin, because now she becomes disposable again. And so this movie is very much kind of like expanding on this idea where it's like, if you want more Twin Peaks, I'm going to make you care about Laura Palmer again,
right,
by showing you all of the twisted shit that led up to her being killed and how everybody in her life basically let her down.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great movie.
I do too, and I think it's so interesting because it's a horror movie, but it's a tragedy too.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like if you know anything about, you've heard anything about Twin Peaks, she dies.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into this movie knowing that she's not gonna make it out.
Yeah.
Like she's not gonna survive this, and yet you still get invested. Like as you kind of watch her spiraling and like watch everything in her life go from sort of, she's like just on the precipice when the movie starts with her. Like, things aren't going great for her, obviously, and she's just sort of just barely holding it together. She just barely has a facade where she's got like a normal friend, and she goes to school, and she's got a boyfriend, and she does extracurricular stuff. But she's like right up on the edge, and then the rest of this movie is her falling over that edge.
Yeah.
And all of the things that push her to that. And Sheryl Lee is just such an amazing actor.
Yes.
Like, if I really think that she is a huge part of the reason why this movie works.
Oh, I would say she's the only reason this movie works. Her and Ray Wise. Ray Wise is equally as good.
Ray Wise he's amazing in this as well.
But if you don't believe Sheryl Lee's performance, the movie doesn't work at all.
Yeah. And it feels like a very sad love letter from Lynch to this character.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, how could someone not feel for her? Like, how could someone not feel empathy for her and like recognize that the tragedies in her life were not her fault? Like, she didn't make the best decision all the time, but she was essentially a child, and all of the adults in her life let her down over and over again.
Yeah, she says she'd been being abused since she was 12.
Yeah.
So, 6 years or so at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things strikes against this movie, and I don't mean from me, but just from the general public, is that, the breakout thing or star from Twin Peaks is Kyle MacLachlan, who plays Agent Cooper.
Yeah, people love Cooper.
Yeah, people love Cooper.
I get it.
Very, very quirky kind of character. And so, and Twin Peaks, the show, has a very quirky kind of weirdness to it.
Yeah.
But it's a safe weirdness because it's network television, so you can only push things so far, right?
Yeah.
So like Bobby Briggs, he's a scumbag, but he's not like, he's like a lovable scumbag.
I was gonna say he's a scumbag, but even there's a sympathetic angle to him. Like there's a soft side. Like, he really does seem to love Shelley.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, he has things about him that redeem him, and there are things he does that suck. But like, yeah, like most of the characters are either complicated but deep down good people, or they're just the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like Leo's just a bad guy.
Right.
Jacques is just a bad guy. Bob is obviously the ultimate bad guy. Like, yeah, it's network TV. It's pretty clear where the lines fall.
Yeah, and they have One-Eyed Jacks, which is this kind of like whorehouse, but it's a network television whorehouse.
Right,
so
all the
it's
girls
like
are in
harmless.
like lingerie.
Yeah.
It looks a little bit more like the Playboy Bunny outfits than it does like what an actual like deep in the woods, hidden in Canada whorehouse probably would look like.
Yeah, it's sleazy, but it's safe sleazy.
It's not the what's the name of the second bar in this movie Firewalk with Me? Is it the Power and the Glory or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's not that.
Yeah, and I think that's...
Which is like a shack in the woods with a bunch of like creeps and a bunch of girls getting roofied and yeah.
And I think that's one of the things about this that makes this movie difficult, if you're a fan of the show, is because you're stepping into a different world of Twin Peaks where you don't have the safety of network television in front of you.
Yeah.
So Bobby shoots a guy in the fucking head, like graphically in this movie. Laura gets sexually assaulted.
She gets raped like 3 times in this movie,
I
like
mean,
on camera. It's not X-rated raped, but it's definitely that's what's happening.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of nudity and like it's not like pardon the expression, but it's not like fun nudity, Right. It's not cute like let's go skinny dipping before Jason kills us. Right.
It's
like in the show you've got your Donna Hayward character who's Laura's best friend, who's a very kind of like virginal presenting. I don't know if she's sleeping with anybody, but she's like a very she's more
of like a Nancy Drew figure,
she's a Nancy Drew
like it's less about her sexuality and more about her trying to figure out the mystery, and then also like she has like a romantic arc as well, but it's not about like that just doesn't enter into her character in the show.
She has a romantic arc that is very much like a 50s movie romantic arc.
Very sweet,
where it's
very chaste.
Fairly chaste.
Yeah.
In this movie, she gets roofied and has her top taken off, and she's just like naked while this dude's just like licking her and stuff.
Yeah. And she's so out of it that like the next day she seems to not remember mostly that it happened.
And it's like in that specific scene, Laura's response, I feel like she's responding on behalf of the audience.
Yeah.
Where it's like she looks over and she's like, Donna? Like she
like,
registers
what the fuck?
that it's Donna that this is happening to. She's like, this is not okay.
Right.
But I'm jumping all over the place here. But it's I think that's part of the trouble getting into this movie.
Yeah, it's a much darker piece than the show was.
Yeah, and I think what it does is it forces you to kind of reconcile the entertainment value you've taken out of the story of this girl who was raped by her father and then murdered. Yeah. By presenting it in a fairly blunt way.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I hesitate to say that this is an entertaining movie. I think it is an entertaining movie, but I don't want to sound like a sociopath when I say that. But you know what I mean, though, right? It's like...
Right. It's engaging. It's fascinating. It definitely keeps your attention. But it's not fluff. Like, it's not silly. Yeah. It's not cute. It's not quirky. It's not endearing or heartwarming or any of those things. Like, there are moments of sympathy and compassion and like moments of redemption in this movie, but by and large, it's a dark thing to watch. And I think it's a lot different to hear about the things that Laura goes through second or third hand in the show. Yeah. It's a lot different to hear that and then see it actually in action.
Oh, totally.
Like it's two completely different experiences because it forces you to give up some of the distance you have as a viewer.
Exactly.
To like sit there and just sit and watch it as it actually occurs to her.
Yeah. And I love David Lynch's defiance in making sequels because this does feel like they were like, we need you to make more Twin Peaks. It's like, okay.
Yeah, if you insist.
Buckle up. And same with The Return. I feel like he approaches Twin Peaks The Return with the same kind of...
I do think The Return is a little bit more balanced.
Yes, I do too. Yeah.
I think some of the... I don't want to read too much into Fire Walk with Me, but I do think there's a level of bitterness there.
Oh, definitely.
Where there's a little bit of like you all wanted your fun kind of soap opera-y show to keep you entertained. I'm going to give you the story of a girl's life falling apart horrifically and then her getting murdered.
Yeah.
And I feel like The Return sort of found the balance between the two, where it's not quite so soap opera-y and it's not quite just like a quirky, fun, silly show. And it's also not as dark as Fire Walk with Me. There's more opportunity for light.
Yeah, I do think in The Return, though, he's messing with, not messing, but he is taking expectations and crunching them in his hand in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, the character of Dougie springs to mind.
Yes.
With who on the first watch, the whole time going like, okay. Then I watched through it again. I was like, I love Dougie. I fucking love Dougie.
I'm having that experience right now
because it's weird, right?
I watched the first, like, what are there, like 16 episodes
18.
in The Return? 18.
Yeah.
I think I got to like 12 or something, and now I think I'm on like 7. So yeah, I'm having a very different. The first time I was just sort of kind of like, I don't want Dougie. I want Cooper.
That's why he's doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you get to the episode that has a 5-minute shot of the guy sweeping the floor?
I think I did the first time through. I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah. He it's basically like what he was doing for network television with the first version of the show.
Yeah.
I feel like he is now taking that same approach to streaming.
Yeah.
Where everything is so disposable and everything is so fast and so quick.
Everybody binges everything.
And it's all about, you know, oh, here's my favorite thing. Here's your favorite thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to make you fucking work for this.
Yes.
Which I appreciate.
I do too. Yeah. Slow down and kind of settle in and watch this for what it is, not for what you wish it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
yes.
Getting back to the movie. So the first,
be a long one.
There's a lot of interesting like behind the scenes things with this movie that I think ended up shaping it into what it was. Kyle MacLachlan, who plays Dale Cooper, did not want to do the movie. He was talked into it by having a much, scaled back involvement. He didn't want to do it for typecasting reasons.
Yeah.
Donna Larflin Boyle, who plays Donna, couldn't do it for scheduling reasons. I'm not sure why Sherilyn Fenn isn't in it. But there's people missing.
Yeah.
And to replace Agent Cooper, the first half an hour of this movie is kind of like weird, bizarro doppelganger Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Which on first watch I feel like is very confusing.
Yes.
But I think if you are more into what the show is into and what David Lynch is into, and as far as doppelgangers and doubles and stuff go, it becomes very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's a White Lodge and a Black Lodge, it kind of makes sense that there's a Twin Peaks and a Deer Meadow.
Yeah.
That sort of tracks in the general David Lynch cosmology. You know, we've got like kind of two of everyone all the time. You've got Cooper and Chet Desmond, but you've also got Chet and Sam Stanley, but you've also got Cooper and Jeffries, and they all kind of wear the same outfits. Well, Jeffries doesn't because he's David Bowie. But even the fact that there's a moment where Leland says to Teresa, "You look just like my Laura."
Yeah.
Like there's just like doubling and like having two of things and people and places makes a lot of sense. So it's fun to watch the first half an hour in Deer Meadow and kind of pick out all the little ways that it's like the same but so different. Like even in like the sheriff's office, like the layout is flipped kind of.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like even just based on kind of the camera angles, I feel like I could be just pulling this out of my ass, but I feel like Lucy's usually when they come in kind of on the other side of the door.
I think you're right. Yeah.
From where
I
the
think she's on the left. I think.
Yeah, from where the receptionist in Deer Meadow is, and like obviously there's the big stuff like the sheriff and the deputy are assholes as opposed to like Andy and Harry in Twin Peaks who
The
were
coffee
really...
was fresh 2 weeks ago.
Right, yeah. But yeah, all of that stuff's really interesting, and I think like kind of a little more realistic. You know, like these small towns, even back in the 90s, like small towns in the middle of rural areas in America were not doing well economically. Like you were more likely to find people who couldn't afford dental care and didn't have full-time jobs and maybe did have a drug problem and maybe were slipping into prostitution because there wasn't anything else for them to do, and people who lived in trailer parks. So it's another way in which I think this movie kind of steps out of the very manufactured TV world and into something a little bit closer to reality.
Sure.
And also it's just kind of fun. It's just kind of fun to see like what if Twin Peaks but bad.
Yes. Yeah. You know, the big difference is that in the show Twin Peaks, the Twin Peaks Sheriff Department is very open to working with Cooper. And in this one, they are very much not open to working with Chet Desmond.
Well, and they don't want to investigate the murder at all.
Right, yeah.
Like they're like, she's whatever, her body's out back in the morgue, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we do learn later on that it's there's clearly corruption involved because the guy that Bobby kills, I think, is the deputy, right? From Deer Meadow?
Yeah, Cliff.
Yeah.
I think it's Cliff. Yeah. But it's another fascinating juxtaposition where it's sort of like, you know, when Laura is killed and when her body is discovered, the whole town kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
In different ways and to varying extents, but it's sort of like it affects everyone because I think everyone feels kind of collectively responsible for not helping her.
Sure.
But they're also like good people, so they care. They didn't pay enough attention to this girl who needed help, but that doesn't make them evil people. It just means that they could have done more and they didn't, and now they feel about like it impacts them for the rest of their lives. Whereas in Deer Meadow, when Teresa gets killed, they're like, whatever, she was a drifter, she's not from here, no one really cares. Like they go around, they interview she worked at the diner and they interview the woman who runs the diner, and she's like, what can you tell us about Teresa? And she's like, nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, whatever. It's I think she had a cocaine addiction.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much it. Like no one seems to care about her as a person like people care about Laura. When Laura dies, Cooper and the sheriff's office are trying to figure out what happened. Donna and James are trying to figure out what happened. When Teresa dies, it's just, you know, Chet and Sam Stanley show up and that's it.
Yeah. This sequence actually struck me differently because I had just done another podcast. I don't think it has come out yet. A Batman podcast where I came on and I talked about 2 stories from the book Batman Black and White, which is a book full of short stories.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that I talked about was one that like I found really affecting. And it's the entire thing is just it's like an short 8-page story about Batman doing an autopsy on a girl who's been murdered.
Ooh.
And basically learning what happened to her through the clues that are on her body.
We all know how I feel about autopsies.
I do, but remind the listeners.
Because I picked Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh, that's right, yes. And essentially through this story, you kind of get this understanding that this is a Jane Doe that he's examining. You get this other side of Batman that I don't think is very people forget about, where the writer Ted McKeever presents Batman as someone who takes just as seriously figuring out the names of the people who don't have names anymore.
Yeah.
And basically holding those inside him is just as important as finding the people who killed them.
Yeah.
And in that story, you don't even see him find the guy.
Yeah.
Like the end of the story is he figures out through what she ate that she works at a diner. And so the end of the story is him figuring out what her name is.
Yeah.
And it's just a really nicely done story. And I was thinking of that when I was watching this because that diner scene, the woman who works at the diner is so dismissive and like casual about the fact that she doesn't know anything about her. And it's just, I don't know. It was just crossing wires of imagery and stuff that I found interesting.
Yeah, and I do think that's really interesting, and I think it sort of kind of goes into the, like, even the difference between how they do Teresa's autopsy versus like Laura's in Twin Peaks, where it's much more, it's more graphic in this.
Oh,
like,
sure, yeah.
You see Teresa's face very much. She looks very dead. Mm-hmm. And it's like well-meaning from the FBI agents, but it is kind of, it's dehumanizing and it doesn't give them a ton to go on. Like, it's not revelatory. And even like, I feel like Kiefer Sutherland's character is kind of like, he finds the letter under the fingernail, which comes back with Laura, right? She's got, I forget what letter is under hers.
I think it might be an R.
Yeah.
I don't know. It spells out Robert, whatever it is.
But even he's kind of, he's sort of bumbling, and they sort of use, like, he's like, well, I should really take her back to Portland to do like a better examination. And Chet's immediately like, yep, yeah, you should do that. You should go. Yeah. Like, you should totally take her and you should leave, and I can just do this myself.
Yeah. So how do you feel about this beginning section? I feel like maybe we should like just talk about chunks, because I feel like the whole night we could be like, well, then there's the part
and
where
what
they
about
do this
this and then this. Yeah.
So like the first half an hour with Chet Desmond is kind of its own little story that ends with Chet going back to the trailer park to investigate the trailers again, and he finds the owl ring, which then apparently removes him from existence.
Yep.
And then you go from
disappears
there.
Him altogether.
And then you go from there, and then Cooper shows up. But like, how do you feel about that opening chunk, the Chet Desmond chunk?
I go back and forth. I sometimes I think it's a little too long. Like, I don't know if we needed their drive into Deer Meadow. I don't know, but I do like it. I do like that it sort of comes into this world at a different angle. Yeah. Like a similar but different angle, because if I recall correctly, I mean, so Twin Peaks begins, the TV show begins with the discovery of Laura's body, and then I think like her friends and family finding out, right?
Yes, they find the body, and then you're introduced to the friends and family, and then they find out in succession. Yeah. Right.
And so this kind of starts it the other way around, where instead of coming at it from the community's point of view, because Teresa doesn't have a community, you come at it from the FBI coming in. Yeah. So it's as though you lopped off that first half or so of episode 1 and just came in with Cooper arriving on the scene. And so I think it's interesting because it's a parallel that kind of emphasizes how different this situation is. Yeah. And then the rest of the movie is kind of drawing in connections about like why did we start with Teresa? Like, why did we start here? And it shows how in a lot of ways she sort of kicks off, like, her decisions and the things she does in her life kind of kick off the rest of what happens in Twin Peaks.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
Laura kind of dies because of decisions that Teresa makes. Not that Teresa, no, I'm not trying to like be like, it's her fault, she did it. I just mean like she is one of many factors that pushes the situation to its kind of inevitably tragic conclusion. Sure. Yeah. It just, through her and her existence, it gets there a little faster. So it ultimately, this is a very long way of saying like I do enjoy it. Yeah. I think some of it's tough to parse, and like I love the tough to parse stuff. Like I love the weird stuff. I love the Philip Jeffries sequence. I think is just fantastic, but it can feel very separate from what else is going on in that section of the movie, where you're sort of like you've gotten this sort of introduction to Chet Desmond and Sam Stanley and David Lynch, as his FBI director self, is sending them to solve this murder and all of that. And then you kind of get the Jeffries stuff.
Right.
And it feels very like, wait, what is this doing here? And then they kind of move away from it, and they never come back to it and address it. Like, Jeffries never comes back. He never really gets talked about for the rest of the movie.
Doesn't come back in this movie.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
But, like...
No, yeah. I think that's the... It's tough, because I like the Chet Desmond stuff from the inverted Twin Peaks angle.
Yeah.
And I do find it interesting that Teresa, right?
Yes.
Teresa is clearly connected to the murder. I think it's a little convenient because I don't know how far away from Twin Peaks this place is.
Isn't it supposed to be like the next town over?
Is it the next town? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe it's not that convenient then. But I love Lil, the blue rose lady.
Yes.
Who's like the most David Lynch character to ever appear in a David Lynch movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like her and the woman who's the singer in Mulholland Drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, they did at the Brattle. They did a screening of Mulholland Drive either earlier this year or late last year, where they had her come in and perform.
Oh my god.
It sold out like immediately. Otherwise, I would have went.
Oh my
But,
god. Yeah, that must have been amazing.
But yeah, I think this is a movie that works better on second watch.
Yeah.
Because the Chet Desmond stuff is so abruptly ended.
Yes.
Like, the information you're getting from that is important to the story.
Right.
But it's not like Chet Desmond shows up ever again. Like, he has never shown up. He does not show up in The Return.
Right.
I kind of was expecting him to show
Sam
up.
Stanley isn't around.
Yeah, Kiefer Sutherland's character never shows up again.
Yep.
But the information you get from there about Teresa and, you know, how she's connected and stuff, that is interesting. The inverted Twin Peaks nature is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it does. This movie does feel very chopped up.
Yes.
And there's 90 minutes of footage that is not in this movie.
Holy shit.
Most of which includes all the characters from the show who aren't in the movie. So, like, you can really kind of see places where they're kind of piecing things together.
Yeah.
Like the Philip Jeffries scene. My memory of that scene was not as hectic because I think on the DVD in the extended deleted scenes.
Is there like a longer version of it?
Yeah, there's a full version of that scene that doesn't have all that other stuff layered on top of it.
Yeah.
And
I feel like I maybe watched that at some point because I also felt very surprised at like how hard it was to watch that scene and try to even sort of get a full mental picture of what was going on during it.
Yeah, that's a scene where honestly I don't think it makes sense in the movie in and of itself. I think if you are versed in the whole lore, that scene works okay because it's part of the larger story. But if we're talking about just this movie,
I think you call it convenience store.
Yes.
No.
If you're just watching this movie, I think you can lose the Philip Jeffries stuff and not miss anything.
Right, which is a bummer because I love the Philip Jeffries stuff.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is like you're not losing anything story wise, but you're losing something texture wise.
Yes,
and I
it's
think
a good way of putting it.
One of the things we should get into, since this is a horror movie podcast, is whether or not this movie is scary. And I would say that it is.
Yeah.
But it's not traditionally scary because David Lynch's movies are fucking scary, but they're not traditionally scary. He has this unbelievable knack for tension that seems to come out of nowhere. Like he just knows how to build unease.
Yes.
And like the Philip Jeffries scene is a really good example of that, where you know you've got the stuff where Cooper's walking back and forth.
Yeah, being a weirdo with playing with security cameras.
Yeah, and then he walks back to check the tape.
Yeah.
As Jeffries walks by him, but that couldn't have actually happened. You know, it's difficult to explain.
Well, and he stays on the tape longer than he possibly could have. Yeah.
And then you've just got David Bowie waltzing into this scene doing a weird Southern accent. not talking about Judy.
Yeah,
whoever Judy is.
One of the things I love about that too is that when Cooper sees the security footage where he has kind of stayed static on it and Jeffries comes through and walks past him, he immediately starts yelling. What is David Lynch's character's name? Gordon. He immediately starts yelling Gordon, and he sounds very upset.
Yeah.
Like, it's clearly like this is upsetting to him. This has unsettled him.
Yeah.
And that kind of builds that feeling of unease and tension, because we as an audience are kind of used to Cooper being sort of like a Zen monk in a weird way. And so to see him kind of getting riled up and upset like this, it's like, okay, this is weird. Like, this is not just Twin Peaks weird. This is like weird.
Yeah, and even the energy that David Bowie brings to the scene is
so
like
great.
Manic and like it's not what you're expecting.
Yeah.
And David Lynch's camera movement, he's got the scariest camera I can think of. Like that sort of like floating. It's almost like a half-speed Evil Dead camera.
Yeah.
Is so scary.
Yeah.
There's something so uneasy about it. The way that he kind of like floats the camera, and he's always got some kind of like sound of it's like a
and it moves like it's disconnected from any sort of point of view or perspective that is understandable.
Yeah,
you know, like it doesn't come at things from a person height all the time, and it doesn't move like a person.
Yeah,
even like a creepy person, you know, like a murderer or whoever's hiding. It's like it doesn't move like that. It doesn't move like anything that makes sense to us.
Right.
Like you're not seeing it from like a dog's level or something. It's like this very strange undulation.
And you know, all it takes for him to make a scene scary is just like a flashlight. Because so much of it looks like he's just having someone do something kind of weird and then shaking a flashlight on their face, and it's scary as shit. Like
Bud Light grunge.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Exactly. As that guy figured it out. But yeah, he also reinforces something I've said on the show multiple times, which I quoted from Christopher Lee one time on a commentary I listened to. There's nothing scarier in the world than an open door.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like, this movie has the scariest fucking doors I've ever experienced.
Yes.
That photograph or painting of the open door is terrifying.
Yeah. Or the first time we see Laura go into her bedroom.
That was that at the time that I saw that.
Yeah.
That was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen, rivaled only by the diner scene from Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
It works on the same principle.
It does. And I'm thinking about it now, and if you hadn't watched the show Twin Peaks, you didn't know shit about Bob.
No. That was my first introduction to Bob.
Like, if you've seen the show and then you watch the movie, when Laura is terrified and is slowly opening the door to her bedroom, you kind of expect Bob.
Yeah.
Like, you maybe he's not there this time, maybe it'll be next time, but you know he's hunting her.
Yeah.
If you go into this movie not knowing that, you're just like, what the fuck is this dude? Like, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's just, I think part of, so he manages to get these unbelievably weird performances, unsettling performances out of people. And I think part of the way he does it, because we were talking about this a little bit, I was like, I don't even know what you say to somebody to get them to the places that they go to.
No idea.
I think part of it is he specifically directs them in a way that is incongruous to the scene that they're in. So, you know, if you're in a, for instance, like in the opening scene when Desmond gets to the sheriff's place, right?
Yeah.
The way that the woman at the front desk starts laughing when he asks for coffee, I feel like you have to specifically direct her to do something like that is not in line with the scene she's in. But like pretend that he has said X and that's how you respond. And I feel like that must be part of it, because that's what makes things so unsettling, because you go into a scene in a David Lynch movie where you expect you think you understand how things are going to go. Right,
based on people's like jobs or positions in the family, in the community, and whatever, based on the setting they're in. You're like, all right, I think a father will act this way,
right,
and I think a mother will act this way. And then when you see the way Laura's parents act, you're like, nope, that's not right.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just a really interesting, I think the thing that's so interesting to me about it is if you're not on board with it, it comes off like I don't think it works, or it comes off as just bad. Like a buddy of mine, every now and then will send me a clip from Lost Highway, where he's like, "Is this what David Lynch movies are like? Because this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen."
Yeah,
and it's the scene where Robert Loggia runs the guy off the road and then starts screaming at him about his car reading the car manual.
Yes.
And it's like, if you cherry pick that one moment out of Lost Highway and have somebody watch it, of course it's going to look ridiculous.
Yes.
But when it's in a larger piece of this weird tapestry that he weaves, it's for some reason it works. For some reason it things don't seem as out of place and ridiculous in the universe that he creates.
You know, I kind of wonder if that isn't one function that the Chet Desmond section kind of serves, is to sort of help you sink into that atmosphere before you get to Laura.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of primed and ready for it. You know what I mean? Like, because I do always feel when I start watching a David Lynch thing that I need the first like 15 or 20 minutes to sort of get back into the rhythms of like how his characters act and speak, and that this is not just like a low budget, poorly acted thing. This is an intentional choice.
Right. like watching Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah.
There's a lot of effects in that show that are quote unquote bad.
Yeah.
Right. But they are clearly intentional choices.
Yes.
And they work in that world, like the way that he kind of does certain effects in a what's the word I'm looking for? Not unrefined, but like primitive kind of way.
Yeah.
It feels like, well, this is a show from 2017. They can't get better special effects, but he's doing that on purpose.
Right.
Because then you get to an episode like episode 8.
Yes.
Which is the 20 minutes of zooming slowly into a explosion of a nuclear bomb. And it's like, it's not that he didn't have access to good special effects.
Or that he can't figure out how to best use them. It's just that scene did not call for them. Yeah.
They are a conscious choice.
Right. And so I feel like I always need that sort of the initial period of kind of getting back into the kind of rhythms and the way the world works in his stuff. And I think it does help that you have the Chet Desmond section of this movie, because then by the time you get to Laura and the Twin Peaks music kicks in, you're ready for it. Like you've sort of reestablished how the people in this world behave and what things look like and all of that. And so when you're there, it's easier to start emotionally connecting with her right away, because you don't need that sort of like buffer period.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think of the Twin Peaks of this movie?
The Twin Peaks as in the town, or the general vibe of it?
I would either one.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, you've got the Chet Desmond chunk, and then they're like, okay, we're going to Twin Peaks.
Right.
And as we talked about before, there's a harder edge to it.
Yes.
But he is still presenting this known quantity of a town.
Yeah.
Albeit differently. Do you like it? Do you wish it was more like the show? Where do you come down on it?
I like it. One of my problems with the show that I think a lot of people had in the second season was that it does go it goes too far off for me into the lives and the sort of foibles of like the side characters, because you have lost that central pull of like Laura and what has happened to her. And once you don't have her as like a focal point, you're dealing with like, Nadine Hurley, who thinks she's in high school again. And James, who's off with some lady, and it all just kind of becomes very disjointed.
Yeah. Not to sidetrack here.
We would never.
I was always like, Leland dies shortly after they discover shortly after we discover he kills her, right?
I think so, yeah. I
don't know why they just didn't keep him around. Because if just because we figure out who killed Laura doesn't mean the people in the show have to know. And so like, or maybe they do. Either way, my point is, if Leland, who you establish as having abused and killed his daughter and then killed his niece, is just out there in the wind, I feel like that kind of would have taken the place of the
Yeah.
Laura mystery, because then
Yeah.
you never know where Leland is going to show up, what he's
Yep.
going to do.
And
Is
when
he
he
gonna kill
shows up,
somebody
is he
else?
going to be Leland or is he going to be Bob?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I could have saved the show.
Call us, David Lynch. No,
If only I could go back.
if only there was some kind of return you could make.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll explain why that is funnier than you think it is right now in a
Oh boy. No, I like this version of Twin Peaks because I think it is more honest. Because we see, like you were bringing up earlier, there's stuff going on up at the hotel. There's stuff going on just over the border into Canada with One-Eyed Jacks and all of this stuff. Like the Roadhouse exists.
Oh yeah,
like,
they don't even go to the Roadhouse, do they? No, they
no.
do. Is the Bang Bang Bar? That's the Roadhouse, right?
I think so.
Okay, they definitely go
Right.
there because I remember seeing the sign. Yeah.
Right, but so these places exist in the town of Twin Peaks. Like it's like many other towns. There's really good areas where there's like fancy suburbs and nice houses, and then there are not so good areas.
Right.
And so I like that this movie, I think, manages to make it feel pretty believable that those are in the same town or nearby. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Twin Peaks is a really small town. It doesn't have a whole hell of a lot. There's like Laura's neighborhood's really nice and Donna's neighborhood's really nice. But then there's like the gas station
Right.
and the diner and where like Leo and Shelley live, which is clearly like a shitty spot to have to live. So I don't know. I like it. I like this version of Twin Peaks. I like that it's not quite as campy. It's not quite as like weird in terms of just like, oh, look at all these characters. It's a little more balanced, I think, between the light and the dark.
Yeah, I like it too. The TV Twin Peaks feels like the postcard version.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
And Fire Walk With Me feels like when you actually get there, Mm-hmm. And I just think it's a really interesting choice. Because like he had to have been conscious of how he was undercutting the expectation of what people were going to get out of this.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I do think I haven't watched original Twin Peaks in a while, but I do remember when I had watched it and when I was like a little more like deeply into it. I saw a lot of stuff that said like the soap opera they watch in that show, Invitation to Love, is like a big key to the rest of the show.
Sure.
Like in terms of like I think like tone.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
things that happen in that show kind of play out similarly into the show that you're into Twin Peaks.
And the way the music cues hit and the way people behave at times. And it does make me think that like the Twin Peaks we're getting in the TV show is kind of through a lens like that.
Yeah.
Like it is more of like the soap opera version of this world. Whereas I think Fire Walk With Me, it's slightly closer to something you could believe exists in reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to decide if I should use that as a jumping off point or if we should stick to the stuff we were just talking about.
We're already over an hour. Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, just to round out some of the scare. Well,
oops.
Let's talk about Leland a little bit.
Absolutely.
Ray Wise plays Leland Palmer as he does in the show. He also puts in a fantastic performance.
Yeah.
Also, scariest shit in the movie. Like there's a scene that I don't think I fully appreciated until watching it this time, where there's a moment where you actually watch Bob leave his body. Like there's like a close on Leland. He's like sitting on the edge of his bed and he's got this really intense look on his face. And then all of a sudden he like relaxes.
Oh, yeah.
And you see Leland come back.
Yeah.
And that's when he goes into Laura's room
right,
and
he's
says
like
he loves
weeping.
her and starts
Yeah,
crying.
yeah.
And it's really I feel like you get so much more of a sense of what this dynamic is
Yeah.
than you do in the show, because the show again, it's creepy, but it's kind of played for laughs a bit in some places.
Yeah.
Like it never gets as dark with obviously it doesn't get but it, like you never get to really spend time with Leland.
Yes.
And Bob.
Yeah.
Ergo.
Yes. Yeah,
the way you do in the movie.
Yeah, and I like that because I think something that in a very David Lynch way, which means a very stylized way, this kind of shows more what it's like to live and deal with somebody who is abusive. Mm-hmm. Because like abusive family members, abusive partners, abusive people, they're not abusive 100% of the time.
Right.
If they were, it would be easy for everyone to leave them.
Right. Yeah.
So it kind of shows that like he has these moments where he's absolutely like he's violating and violent towards her. He attacks her and he rapes her. Then there are moments kind of in between where he's just menacing. Like he's just kind of like needling at her and like tormenting her. The dinner scene,
I'm
thinking,
sure.
where it's like, you didn't wash your hands.
Yeah.
Like, he tells her to sit down. Come here, sit down. Hurry up, sit down. And then he berates her for not washing her hands. But then there are moments where he's seemingly really remorseful and really sad and upset, and he wants her to comfort him. He wants to be comforted.
Right.
And I think that stuff is actually very frightening because it's very realistic in terms of like, yeah, somebody can seem like they're a sweet, good dad or a good partner or whatever. And then all of a sudden, with no warning, they can become this monster who is violent and abusive.
Yeah, and you really get the sense in this movie that not even Leland really knows what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, and
he seems kind of off the tracks.
Yeah, like the scene
regularly.
The scene where they're at the stoplight and Mike shows up and just starts screaming at the both of them.
Yeah.
Like that's not even a capital S scary type of scene, but the interaction is so intense and the performances of everybody are so intense and really when they zoom off and pull off into the
like auto shop or
auto
whatever.
shop.
Yeah.
And Leland starts going like, you can't just let people treat people like that. Yeah. And then Laura is like so authentically shaken and she's like, what was that?
Right. Did you know that man?
Yeah.
Do we know him? Have I met him? I don't know what just happened. Yeah.
And you don't like you don't get the sense that Leland really does understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's also this kind of sense that maybe, you know, Mike is obviously connected to Bob, and so who knows what's actually going on inside Leland.
But also, like, have you ever been in a fight? Like verbal or physical? Have you ever like really been like in a fight where like your adrenaline is up and it's kind of like a fight or flight moment?
Not really. I'm pretty big. Yeah. Most people
that
avoid me.
Doesn't really happen to you. Yeah. But like if you've been in a moment like that, you know that like once you're safe, like once you get out of that situation, it's really upsetting. Even if it seemed not that bad on the surface, like if you have like an altercation with somebody and then you get into your car and you're safe, you can like really freak out.
I mean, I've never been in a situation like this.
Yeah.
I get that response at the drop of a hat with people who if people who I don't know act towards me as though they are a Twin Peaks character, I think about it for the rest of the day and go, that was fucking, I don't know what that was.
A man can't just come out of the blue like
exactly.
that.
Like
what's the world coming to when a man comes out of the blue like that at you?
If someone, for instance, we were driving one time and there was a bike in the bike lane and I went around this bike.
Yeah.
I gave him like a lot of space.
Yeah.
And then came up to a red light.
Yeah.
And the guy on the bike came around to my driver's side where my window was down and started yelling at me for cutting him off going into a red light. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking. Like I went around you with like 25 feet. And that like, and even after the whole thing, Caitlin was like, you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't know why that guy did that, but the rest of the day I was thinking about it. Like what? I don't.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just not something that I'm used to, obviously.
But you can have people have a physical reaction to that kind of thing too, because it does there's chemical things happening in your body where your adrenaline hits
Sure.
and you end up like shaking and upset and it feeling nauseous or whatever. Like, so that scene is like scary in a real life way.
Yeah.
Like if you have a near miss in a car or you get yelled at by a threatening person in a parking lot or something, and then you're like alone and you're like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I may as well tell this story. The singular moment that was like the most like this when I was younger disturbed me to my core.
oh,
I was watching my aunt's dog,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And so I this is cute greyhound, skinny
Aw.
greyhound, and I took the dog for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
and I was walking by this bar, and two guys out front have a cigarette, and one of the guys goes, "Oh wow, man, that's such a cute dog." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, yeah, it's my aunt's." And then he goes, figured, okay, that's the end of the
Yeah.
conversation. Then he goes, "Yeah, I know a girl who'd like to have sex with that dog." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, oral sex." And I'm like, and I just kept walking.
Wow.
And I walked down the street.
Were you walking by the Power and the Glory or whatever it was
Apparently.
called?
Apparently, I walked down the side street of the bar, and I
Yeah.
legit waited down there for like 20 minutes until
my
the
God.
person left before I went back because it was so freaked me out. And I was like 13 or 4. I was a younger kid, and it was just like I'd never
That's
had.
upsetting. That's younger than I thought you were going to say
yeah,
you were.
I'd never had a person speak to me like that.
Yeah.
And it was very upsetting and very like, it was very disturbing.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of experience where it's like you just don't really know exactly how to react to it.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
sure I've just described the feeling that most women have every day of their life when talking to men. But
Not every day, but bunch of them had a bunch of those.
yeah. I know that's not special, but
Yeah.
it's.
But no, I get what you're like. It's unexpected. You have this sort of like uncanny valley moment of just
Yeah.
like, are you saying the words I think
Of
you're
all
saying
the
to
things, of all the things this guy could have said to me, that was not on the bingo card.
me? Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's like he does a really great job of keeping that tension and
Yeah.
Another person to call out is Grace Zabriskie, who plays
Is that Sarah?
Sarah Palmer.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a ton to do in this movie, but she kills it.
Mood wise, she sets the mood in that house.
Oh, yeah.
In the background in a way that's really nuanced and really fucking great. Like you can tell she knows other stuff is going on that she does not really want to face up to.
Yeah.
And she's torn between this like loyalty to her husband and kind of disbelief that what she suspects might be happening is happening. And then clearly she feels really alienated from Laura. Like she doesn't know what they never really talk.
Right.
Like there's a bunch of scenes between Leland and Laura. There's really not a lot.
She has barely any lines. She's barely in it, but the places that she's in it are very effective. Like she comes into that dinner scene.
Yeah.
And I don't even think she has a lot. Maybe she has one or two.
She does like, but it's very much like, oh, stop it or something. She doesn't like it when you do that. Like it's kind of little stuff in that doesn't. She's not saying anything crazy, revolutionary, like. But yeah, the way in which she delivers the lines and her general, the attitude of anxiety that she has, the fact that there's tons of cigarette like ashtrays all around the house and they're all full of her cigarettes because she cannot stop smoking. And then I honestly think one of the most impressive and subtle moments is like when they're going to bed.
Oh, yeah.
And Leland gives her what I assume is supposed to be a glass of warm milk. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that he's drugging her, and it's clear that she kind of knows it.
Yep.
Like, there's a moment, he hands it to her without her asking for it. She doesn't thank him. She doesn't say anything to him. She kind of doesn't even really look at him. And there's a moment of hesitation before she starts drinking it, where it's this kind of moment where you can tell she's thinking, I don't have to drink this.
Right.
But if I don't, he's probably going to do what he's going to do anyway, and then I have to either just sit here and listen to it or I have to do something about it. And
Right.
I'm not strong enough to do either of those things. So I'm just going to drink it and maintain my sort of ability to deny what's happening around me. But she doesn't say anything. She doesn't say any of that. Like there's no,
Yeah.
she doesn't need to. It's
No.
all conveyed there in like 3 really subtle motions
Yep.
of like taking the glass, pausing, and then drinking it.
Yeah, and that whole sequence too is just like that. From that point, you know, there's like this sort of ritual built into it.
Yeah.
Where it's like he's clearly done this before.
Yes.
And then
yeah.
that's, I think, when he turns the fan on.
Yes,
and
the
then
most
Laura,
ominous ceiling fan in the world.
Laura responds to the sound of the fan going on.
Yep.
Which is one of those things where it's like, I feel like you hear that all the time for
Yeah.
people who are in these situations where there's a trigger
Yep.
like that. And then you've got fucking Bob climbing his way, slithering his way through
Yes.
the window.
Yes.
And it's all
In
so
his Canadian
creepy.
tuxedo.
So I want to talk about Bob a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, as I was watching it this time, I love the weird mythology
Yes.
stuff. I love
Yeah.
the Black Lodge stuff.
Yep. Mike and Bob
Mike
and the
and Bob
arm.
and the arm. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yep.
Watching it this time, I started thinking about whether or not, or I should say if you wanted to, you could read Bob as much as he is some sort of supernatural entity. You could also read him as Laura's compartmentalization of what's happening.
Oh yeah.
And it takes on kind of a different, definitely a different tone when you read it that way, because
Yeah.
it feels a lot more real and visceral,
Yeah.
because you know she's got this mask that she's placed over the person who's been abusing her to the
Yeah.
point that she doesn't actually even, when she finds out it's her dad, she loses her fucking mind.
That to me is one of the most frightening and like heartbreaking scenes
Yeah.
in the movie, where it's the one we talked about earlier, where we said, you know, she goes into her room for the first time and she opens the door kind of slowly and Bob is back there and she screams and she's got to get out of the house, and she kind of like runs down to the corner of the street and kind of flings herself under some bushes.
Yeah.
And is crying, and then she waits to see who comes out of the house, because it's like she's gotten to a point where she's like, I gotta know, and it's her dad, and she's so like, it feels so authentically heartbreaking
Yeah.
when she's coming to grips with this. So like, yeah, and that's the thing, people who have traumatic shit happen to them in their lives, they block out stuff.
Yeah.
It does happen. And so yeah, that's definitely a reading of Bob that I buy and also think is like extremely tragic and sad.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's interesting about Twin Peaks in this movie, and probably all of his stuff,
Yeah.
where I think there's a reading that you can have that you can say is true that doesn't necessarily involve everything. So,
Yeah.
for instance, like, I think you can read the Bob stuff as this compartmentalization,
Yep.
even though it coexists with this supernatural stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I think you can choose to say, like, okay, it's this, not that, even
Yeah.
though all of that stuff is present. That being said, I love the supernatural stuff.
Oh yeah.
And we've talked about this previously. I prefer the tone of this and the tone of Twin Peaks: The Return to the show,
Yeah.
to the original show.
Yeah.
And I think that's because this is the first thing I saw. Because
Yeah, that makes sense.
this is definitely leans into the weirdness factor and the
Yes.
darkness
Yeah.
in a way that we already talked about, that the original show doesn't. And so when we get to The Return, seeing that it's, first of all, has so much to do content-wise with this movie,
Yeah.
and kind of stylistically is very more similar to the movie than the original show.
Yeah, I was struck by that this time, because like
Yeah.
I said, I'm currently trying desperately to make my way finally through The Return, and so it was interesting watching this and kind of having seen some of that recently.
I hesitate to ask this because I feel like we could be
Yes.
talking about this for another 3 hours if I do.
Uh-oh.
What do you have? Do you have a read on the Black Lodge stuff? Do you get anything out of it subtextually, other than it being the fun kind of weirdness that it is?
Yeah.
does that make your brain hurt to think about? For instance, I just casually looked up this movie on the Twin Peaks Reddit.
Oh boy.
And I should say I looked up the movie and it brought me to the Twin Peaks Reddit.
Yep.
And most of the Twin Peaks Reddit was like Reddit threads with like 7 to 15 comments, and the thread was like, here's what I think the watch means.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're talking about the watch shows up here, this thing, time, what is time,
Yes.
And it's like, okay.
In quantum physics.
Yeah. It's like
a singularity is a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And therefore, the trees in a circle out in the woods are this. And you're like, maybe.
Right. And that long video gets into that stuff a little
Yeah.
bit, which is kind of where you kind of got to go, you either take it or leave it. That's when I kind of just like to listen to it. But
yeah. No, I mean, as somebody whose favorite book for many, many years was the book House of Leaves. Like, I don't know if you've read that one.
I have not, no.
Yeah, no, I love the Black Lodge shit. I do think that if you try too hard to pin it down into absolute meaning, then you're just going to make your brain hurt and you're not going to come out any the wiser. I do think it acts as a place beyond space and time.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
I don't think time works there the way it works in our world where time is linear. I think people can go in there and spend probably what feels like 5 minutes or what feels like an eternity and come out at different times in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an evil place. I don't think it has I think evil is too reductive and too simple, because I think if we're just an evil place, that just means it's hell.
Right.
And
yes.
I don't think it's hell. I think, not to jump too far, I mean, I'm going to jump all the way to the very end of this movie, but that's where Laura ends up.
Right.
She ends up in the lodge, and so does her angel.
Yes.
And so does Cooper.
Yeah.
So she ends up there, and she's escaped Bob. Like, he can't have her anymore. He cannot possess her. He cannot be her. And she's comforted kind of by Cooper. He kind of stands by her to keep her company. So she's not alone. And she has this vision of her little guardian angel that hung in her room. And it's this moment of she knows she's sort of escaped the torment that was awaiting her.
Yeah.
Like she had to go through the pain and the torment of what happened in her life, but she did not have to go and will not have to go through the pain and torment that her father is going through, being possessed by Bob.
Yeah.
So I think the lodge is not a bad place per se, but I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, the movie ends, after all is said and done, the movie ends on a freeze frame of her smiling.
Yes, exactly.
She's got this sort of delirious joy.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of not entirely dissimilar to the way that Censor ends.
Yeah.
Different circumstances, obviously.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, not to get too, whatever about it. But, in the Bible, man can't see the face of God.
Right.
Seeing the face of God will drive you crazy. And so that sort of level of almost hysterical joy is what could be called a religious experience. And so I know she looks at times like she's almost manically smiling, but it's she's seeing something that to her is beyond human comprehension.
Yeah.
It's this ultimate expression of peace and protection and finally getting relief from her torment.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So having watched that long video,
yes.
I have these extrapolations the guy made in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Watching this time, I did have a read on it that was kind of similar to the thing that this guy was talking about in this video. And I think it all kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, about how David Lynch really wants people to care about what happens to Laura, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I think that David Lynch, I think that there's a perspective on this movie that David Lynch knows that in order for people to care about her, he has to kill her.
Yeah.
And I think what is happening a bit is Lara, the character, is becoming aware that she has to die. And so when you get into this stuff where she's sort of like seeing the flashing lights and stuff, which look remarkably like television lights. If
yes.
You know.
I do buy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain kind of thing where it's like the core concept of this guy's video is, well, one of the core concepts is that Laura's death is the creation of the show. If Laura doesn't die, this universe doesn't exist.
Right.
And so I think in this movie there's a certain element of David Lynch knows that in order for this universe to exist, he has to kill her.
Yes.
And she starts to become aware that she has a fate that she can't escape.
Yeah.
And this is obviously all super metaphysical shit that is beyond the fact that it's just about a girl who spirals out of control because she's killed by her father. But but there is this certain sort of like inevitability to everything where I feel like what you're talking about, that sort of like a delirious joy, comes from her crossing that threshold and kind of realizing that this universe does exist because of her sacrifice, sort of.
Yeah, because at that point she's not only in the moment at the very end of the movie, she's not only realizing that she has to die, she's already dead.
Right.
Like she has already suffered and been murdered horribly and
the
suffered.
show already exists.
Yeah,
you know?
and she's done it. She's made it through it. And so to then kind of see that you went through all of this, but this is why. There was purpose. There was meaning. We're going to make meaning out of your suffering. We're going to make something from what you went through. And because you went through it, all of these other things are going to cascade from this.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think backs this up, that I'm going to ruin for you, involves one of the final scenes in the movie where Laura is riding on the back of James's motorcycle.
How about this, James?
Which in and of itself is a really affecting scene because like James is the one person, he's the only one left at this point in the story who has not abandoned her, essentially. I guess I wouldn't say Donna ever really abandons her, but Laura kind of removes Donna from the equation herself.
Yeah, there are characters who are made helpless.
Yes.
Like Donna she tries. Donna tries, and I would argue harder than anyone else in Laura's life to connect with Laura on a real level and to see what she's really going through and to try to put herself there and say, I'm going to stand between you in these things.
Yeah.
And she tries, but it's too much for her, which is reasonable.
Sure, yes.
It makes sense to me. And Laura turns it around and ends up protecting her. And so, yeah. But yes, James does stick by her when, Bobby has said, you only want me for a cocaine hookup.
Yep.
And she can't rely on her parents and no one else is there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that scene is really...
That was like probably my favorite James scene in anything he's in.
Yeah, he kind of sucks generally, but he was good in this movie.
Well, it's too bad, not to derail too far, but it's too bad because I feel like they never really knew what to do with him.
Yeah.
Like they never really had a character to give him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's so affecting to me about that scene is like, not to go biblical again, but like I feel like this is Laura approaching the passion, essentially.
Yeah.
Where it's like she's in the process. She has this destiny that she knows that she has to go to.
Yeah.
And that's why her reaction with him is so intense.
Yes.
He doesn't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, he's been very outside of all of the action of the movie. Like he kind of drives in on his motorcycle, tries to be nice to her, tries to get her to confide in him so he can help her, and then she's like, get out of here, and then he drives away.
Yeah. And she is pushing him away with such intensity.
Yes.
I think because she knows that she has to do this.
Yep.
But she does legitimately love this guy.
Yeah.
But she has to push him away because she has a role that she has to fulfill.
Yep.
And James, I said when we were watching this, I was like, man, I can't believe he just leaves her.
Yeah.
But then you were like, I mean, supernatural stuff aside, she's kind of a lot. I was like,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, like, he is her side piece. Like,
Right.
she has a boyfriend, and he is like King Goon of the high school.
Right.
And James is like the poor kid whose parents abandoned him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very much like he does not have any sort of power or social standing in this town.
Yeah.
He's a teenage kid with no family and like no money and no prospects. He's going to end up working at the car garage with his uncle. Like that's it. That's it for him. That's all he's going to get.
Yeah.
You know, whereas Bobby, for instance, is the major's son and lives in a big fancy house and gets out of trouble no matter what he does. But yeah, Laura is a lot. Like, if you don't know what all she's going through, because she won't tell you, but she's having like cocaine mood swings in your face.
Yes.
I can kind of believe being a little bit like, all right, bye. You gonna call me?
Yeah. And to his credit, I mean, like he gets, after she runs off into the woods.
Yeah.
He's got that scene at the light, at the stoplight, where he's clearly debating whether or not he should go after her.
Yeah.
And then when he doesn't and he speeds off, he doesn't
Yeah.
do it like coolly. Like he's clearly
Right. He's not like, oh, fucking bitch.
Yeah, he's clearly
you know?
like, emotionally fragile or broken about it.
Yeah. And she does have the habit of kind of, and this is another thing that I think is actually fairly realistic, is when you know somebody who's like dealing with this kind of stuff, they get very good at seeming like they're always kind of going to be in this level of stasis.
Yeah.
Like, you're always going to be in like low level crisis. You're always going to be like in a fight, or they're always going to be upset, or there's always going to be problems, and there's always going to be whatever, but they'll be fine. They land on their feet. They always get through it. They come out the other side to drive you crazy again.
Yeah.
And I think Laura has a little bit of that going on, where people are so like James, for instance, is so used to her having like crazy mood swings and just like randomly being like, fuck off, get away from me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be around you anymore. That he's kind of just like, all right, it's another one of those.
That's the thing. Like when you're dealing, when you know someone who has this sort of problem, you want to help, but there's a certain point where the people on the outside are never going to know when it's the real thing.
Right. Right.
That's not the right phrase to
No,
use,
but
you know what I mean.
I understand. Like when is it a 2-alarm fire and when is it a 5-alarm fire?
Yes.
Because they feel the same after a while.
Right,
And
yeah.
it's harder and harder to tell the difference between like what is a cry for help that is coming from a genuine place and what is just somebody acting out because they're hurt.
Right, exactly, yeah. Well, in that scene, there's a moment where Laura's eyes kind of look off into the distance and she just screams this horrified scream.
Yes,
Just to kind of veer off slightly, Sheryl Lee, best scream in movie history.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Didn't she end up like teaching acting classes?
Yeah, I think she might still be doing it. Actually, it's her and the guy who plays Bobby's friend Mike.
Oh, fun.
They both teach at the same school, I think.
Oh, I love it.
Also, we found out last night, Sheryl Lee was married to Neil Diamond's husband. Nope. Son. That's the right one. My brain just...
We have been recording for too long.
Sheryl Lee was married to Neil Diamond's son, and she also once dated David Duchovny.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
interesting. Anyway.
So, yes, she has this very strange moment with James in the woods where she looks kind of past him and lets out a blood-curdling scream.
Yes. What you are going to learn in Twin Peaks: The Return is that what she sees is 2017 Dale Cooper.
Huh. Who at this point she's seen in dreams, but she's never met in person.
Yes.
And the version of him she's seen in dreams is young Coop.
Yes.
Yeah.
So...
Interesting.
Do you want me to ruin the whole thing for you?
Do you want to ruin the whole thing for me?
I want to talk about it, but I don't want to ruin it for you.
Should I like go in the other room and you can monologue for 5 minutes and I'll come back?
All right, I'm not going to say what happens after that. I'll let you watch it, and then we can discuss it off air. But let me just say,
guys,
that
if you love this extremely long Twin Peaks episode and want to hear more Twin Peaks yelling, we can probably make that happen.
That would be interesting. I would put that out there to the patrons if they want to hear us talk more about Twin Peaks.
A Christmas gift for the patrons.
But there is what happens from that point in the return.
Yeah.
Falls in line with what we were talking about Lara being the impetus for the universe and stuff like that. But I'll wait until you watch it before we talk about it.
All right.
But yeah, what else is there to talk about? Okay,
so many things. We haven't talked really about the old lady and her grandson.
Like I don't even know.
We haven't talked about the man in the red suit with the really long nose.
Yeah, I don't. What is the ring?
Yeah, I do find it interesting that if we're going to go into some of the weird kind of totems and esoterica, that Cooper says, don't take the ring.
Yeah.
I think that can be read as a young, relatively inexperienced Cooper jumping to conclusions and being wrong.
I think that's what the guy in the video says, too.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, I'm not saying you stole that from him.
I probably subconsciously did.
Maybe, I don't know.
That's fine.
But
all credit to this unnamed guy in the video we keep referencing. We should really probably give him actual credit.
It's from, I think the YouTube channel is called Twin Perfect.
Okay.
So if you look up Twin Perfect, Twin Peaks, you'll find like 2 or 3 videos that he did. Okay. But yeah, which I find a little confusing.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of strange. It's like for Coop to give her the wrong information. I don't know. It's just narratively is kind of weird, dicey for me.
Yeah.
Because it's, he's saying don't take the ring, but her taking the ring ultimately is what saves her. But
it also is ultimately what kills her.
I guess shouldn't say save, but
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean it kind of, if we're gonna go for the immortal soul and end of things, it does save her soul.
Yeah.
It saves her from becoming Bob.
Yeah.
But it also kills her.
Right.
Like,
I wonder if it's part of the thing where it's Cooper. Cooper understands that her taking the ring will be a bad thing. Cooper doesn't want her to be killed.
Right.
She knows that this is what she has to do.
Yes.
Because Teresa had the ring. Teresa was killed. And so now she needs to take the ring in order to complete this ritual, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And Cooper doesn't know that, so he obviously wants to save her, but she knows that it needs.
Yeah,
to
she
go
has
through.
information he does not.
Yeah. Does the ring show up in the show? I can't remember.
I can't remember either, which leads me to think no. And if it does, we might not ever see it. It might just be something that's talked about.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been too long.
Yeah. So getting into that ending, that is a really intense final 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, because so she leaves. She's kind of known the whole time on her last day that she's supposed to go meet up with Jacques, Leo, Ronette at like Jacques' hunting cabin or some shit. Because the men want to quote unquote party, which means do drugs and have sex with them and be awful. And so like after she kind of gets a ride from James.
They could have been nice about it.
But they weren't.
Yeah, they could have. I mean, just like generally, you know,
it would have been nice if they had been.
Yeah. Why do they always have to be jerks about it?
Why you gotta be so rapey?
Yeah.
Yeah. But so they Laura ends up in the cabin with them, and against her will, Jacques ties her up and rapes her. And it seems like Leo does the same to Ronette because both of the girls end up tied up.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
Which is how Leland is kind of able to, once he hides outside and fucks up Jacques when Jacques' not expecting it, and then Leo, because he's a coward, runs away. That's how he's able to control both girls, is that these two fucking assholes have already tied them up. And yeah, it's a really kind of like, it's a really scary final like 10 minutes when it's, you know, like Laura knows that this is her dad.
Yeah.
And she knows this is it. Like she's clearly very aware. I think she even says like, "Are you going to kill me?" Like I think she like says it at some point.
Yeah.
And he says like, I'm going to be you or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I like this movie. I don't know. It's like that's all of
It's like horror. It's a horror movie, but in a way, it's more like because it's horrifying, not because it
Yeah.
has any like big capital H genre horror movie tropes. You
Right,
know,
right.
there's not like there's some supernatural shit and there's a killer. You know, and like he's not yet, but Leland becomes a serial killer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of this, he's already killed Teresa at this point.
Yeah, is 2 a serial or is that?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't
guess
know.
Technically, I don't know.
I should know my definitions about serial killers. You'd think I would.
Yeah.
This is my bad.
I think as soon as you tuck a typed letter under someone's fingernail, I feel like you're in the ballpark.
Yeah, once you start approaching some Fincher's 7
yeah.
level evil serial killer shit, you're already on your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David Lynch, just in general, the thing that I find so interesting about his stuff, and I think that this movie obviously falls into that, is just like, I don't need it all to make sense because there's just so much interesting stuff to chew on.
Yeah.
That makes it makes you engage with it in a level that pretty much no other person's movies I've ever seen do. Like I think about Mulholland Drive like a lot.
Yeah. Just like idly while you're
Yeah.
like chopping vegetables for dinner, you're like,
Yeah, every now and then I think back as like,
remember the blue box in her
were
nightstand?
they the same person? Or like, like there's just so many concepts and ideas that are just interesting to chew on, and I think it's so rare to find a movie that can like
But I think
interest
you have to
and disturb you on a level that isn't just surface level.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, but I think you also have to kind of like that stuff.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Like you have to like kind of doing the like puzzle box thing in your head, and you have to be comfortable with some level of ambiguity because like for instance, like I know my husband is not a David Lynch fan.
Neither is my girlfriend. Yeah.
Which is always but for Greg it's like surprising. Because he likes other weird movies and he likes experimental stuff. He likes like surrealist artists and stuff.
Okay.
Like,
all right. Sure. That is a little surprising.
It's it's always really surprising to me that he doesn't enjoy it. But I think for him, there's just like tonally something doesn't click. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it to him feels like just weirdness for weirdness' sake.
Yeah.
Like he knows there's more behind it than that, but it's not, there's not enough worth it for him to peel back the layers. It's not doing anything for him.
You know what's actually funny? I think you and I might be the only David Lynch fans in our friend group.
Yes.
However, actually, I didn't realize this until recently because he doesn't really like project this. But Pat is actually a Twin Peaks fan. He's got a Twin Peaks phone case. Which
what?
Yeah, I know. Never in a million years would I have guessed that.
I guess I've never met our friend Pat.
Yeah, apparently not. We should have had him on the show.
God damn.
But like, yeah, across our general friend group, I think you and I definitely, Pat, possibly. I don't know how far his circle goes out, but But like, you know, we put it out there to anybody who wanted to join us, and we know we have a friend Laura who likes the show Twin Peaks.
Yes.
But her response was, I don't think I ever want to watch that movie.
Yeah.
And I get it because
totally, yeah.
You know, as we talked about at the beginning, you're kind of stepping over a line into a different world, and how deep do you really want to go?
Right, into a story that you know is just going to be horrific and tragic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
Yeah, but it is interesting because it does kind of show you that, like, you know, we're talking when we talk about our friend group, we're talking like 20 people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's like, you know, 2 out of 20. That's a pretty small sample.
Yeah.
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 So it's like it's really not for everyone.
No.
Is the lesson.
No. It's for 70% of the people who voted for the patron poll as to whether or not we were going to do this. So thank you guys. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we round it out?
I feel like we've barely touched on anything, but we are approaching 2 hours.
Yeah,
so
I'm pretty excited about that. This makes up. As long as I don't somehow manage to magically erase this.
I will murder you.
This will hopefully
and
make up
wrap
for the,
you in plastic and drop your body in a river.
You would be in the right to do that. Hopefully, this will make up for the Dracula debacle.
Aw.
Do you think this should be on our list?
Do I personally think this should be on the list? Maybe. Do I think more broadly it should be on the list? Probably not.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to be on the list. I personally find parts of it scary enough to put it on the list of horror movies, but I think the wider consensus would probably be against it.
Yeah, I think this would be a tough one if you were going to say, pick a random movie off the 200 best horror movies list, and they landed on Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
You'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Where I don't know if I would put it explicitly on the list. I'd put it on my list.
That's kind of what I should have said.
Yeah.
Is that, like, if I was coming up with my top 200, it would be on it. But I understand why it's not on the generic top 200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the music. Like
there's so much we did not talk about.
Yeah. Angelo Badalamenti, who does all of, well, I don't know if he does everything that he might do all of David Lynch's stuff. I'm not.
Definitely does all of Twin Peaks.
He does all of Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Yes. Some of the best themes.
Yes.
You know, the Twin Peaks theme is amazing.
Yep.
Laura's theme is unbelievable.
Yep.
I have 3 vinyl album sets worth of Twin Peaks music, and
I only have one.
They're all great. Mm-hmm. He's a master at mood. He just gets some really.
And I think he really gets the David Lynch mood.
Yes.
You know, like, I think they're on a similar wavelength, and so it works really well together. Like, you know, you could not have John Carpenter score this movie.
Right. Apparently, the way that they work, or at least the way they did the original show, is that David Lynch would sit down at the keyboard with Angelo.
Yeah.
And basically describe the scene. Mm-hmm. And he would sort of like improv it.
Oh, wow.
And then David Lynch would be like, that's it. Like they would kind of like co-create to a certain extent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it'd be sort of like there's a girl and she's at the diner and she's doing whatever. And no, it's sadder than that. Or it's like, you know, she's depressed and she's worried and she's trying to hide it and that kind of stuff.
Yes, exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They work really well together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do great stuff. The one album that I would love to have, which I think has been out of print for a long time, is the Mulholland Drive soundtrack.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who owns the rights to that.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Anyway, we have done 2 hours on Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Yep.
As our wild card.
Aren't you going to fix me a drink, Laura?
Laura, what is the line? What does she say? I wrote it down. Your Laura disappeared. It's just me now.
It's just me now. The Clay McCormick story.
Yep. Yeah, I hit the randomizer button. Beep boop boop beep boop 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 beep boop, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited because next time we will be doing number 121. Let me just make sure that is correct. It is, which is George Romero's Martin.
Oh my God, it's finally happening.
It's finally happening.
Ooh.
I'm very excited. We might go 2 hours on Martin as well.
Shit. I'm bringing a 5-hour energy next time.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get myself nice and caffeinated up and make you deal with me being insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably not that long, but I'm just really looking forward to watching this. I'm looking forward to you watching this because you've never seen it.
I
right?
have not, and you have told me nothing about it. You've told me that it exists and the basic premise, but you have not extrapolated, which is great because I will get to experience it all.
I don't. Me being so excited about it, I don't want to like overhype it or something, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, no, totally. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening.
If you've made it this far, you are a fucking champion.
If you'd like to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/thepensky file. If you sign up for our Patreon, you can get Amanda and I's coverage of Stephen King's Second String movies. In August, we haven't done August yet, actually, when this comes out. It's sometimes they come back. We just did Maximum Overdrive and Christine and It Chapter 2 and Needful Things and all this kind of fun stuff.
Silver Bullet.
Silver Bullet. We've only got a couple left because the year is almost over, relatively.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. All leading up to the 1990 TV movie of It,
The culmination.
which I'm very excited to talk about. But thank you guys for listening. As always, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we will see you next time in 25 years.
Bye, everyone.